Kia ora, I'm Miriam McHummel. Tonight, the drug business. Some New Zealanders are dying because they can't afford medicines that could save them. But other Kiwis are finding new ways to get the drugs they need. These are life-saving drugs the government won't buy, at least not yet. So officially, they remain out of reach to most of us. But guess what? If you're desperate, there is a way to get these wonder drugs. You see, not all nations recognise all drug patents. And as John Hudson reports, Kiwis are increasingly looking offshore to source inexpensive, life-saving medicines.
He lives in a tiny Tasmanian hamlet. Just the old Woodbridge store and the post office. But from here he started a global revolution.
It's culpable homicide in my view. It's just pure and simple greed. It's just obscene greed.
Greg Jeffries is fighting what he calls greedy drug companies by sending inexpensive medicines to sick people around the world, including New Zealand.
I'd be dead, actually, if I didn't take these meds.
For Kiwi Chris Hazelwood, Greg's Buyers Club medicines mean new hope.
It's really down to a last chance now.
For 25 years, a virus has been slowly destroying Chris's liver.
My prognosis is death, 3 to 5 years. Dying of liver failure is very unpleasant.
Chris is one of about 50,000 Kiwis who have hepatitis C.
So many people have hepatitis C, and yet we hear so little about it.
It's a subculture illness. Primarily, it's blood-borne and contracted from exposure to infectious blood, and mostly through needles or transfusions.
Some got Hep C through blood transfusions, but for most it was sharing drug needles back in the 70s and 80s. Now, fearing reproach, they suffer in silence. Chris picked it up 25 years ago when he played in the Dunedin indie band King Loser.
We played a show, we were paid in drugs, and these were infected or not very clean.
So you did something dumb when you were young?
Very much so.
His youthful folly created a life of illness, which has led to liver cirrhosis. At 49, he's a sickness beneficiary, cut out the alcohol years ago. Now he's into fresh juice.
That's nice.
It's good, isn't it? Yeah.
But good food won't rid Chris's body of Hep C. He needs this stuff, sofosbuvir, which combined with other new drugs has the potential to wipe hepatitis C off the planet.
The last 5 years has really seen a revolution in the way we manage hepatitis C.
Professor Ed Gain is at the centre of that revolution.
We actually had considerably reduced virus in 2 weeks, but because...
In 2010, Ed Gain ran the sofosbuvir trials in Auckland. Actor Rena Owen was among those who were cured.
I mean, that's one of the things most people have said to me since I've been cured for the last 2 years, is how well I look.
People actually feel better a few weeks after starting treatment, and the reason they feel better is that the virus disappears from the blood. But what's more is that you prevent the patients from ever developing progression of their liver disease, and you prevent these life-threatening complications.
But there's a problem.
How much do these drugs cost in New Zealand?
Somewhere between 80,000 and 92,000 for a 12-week course.
So if you're a sickness beneficiary, there's no way you can afford that?
In fact, none of my patients can afford it.
Worldwide, about 150 million people have hepatitis C. Now, the good news is that since these wonder drugs were released, 650,000 people have been cured. But the bad news is that 1.5 million people have died because they can't afford them.
18 months ago, Tasmanian Greg Jeffries discovered he had hepatitis C.
It was just like being hit by a thunderbolt, like being told you got cancer or something.
Did you know what hepatitis C was?
I didn't.
Fortunately for Greg, the new hepatitis C drugs had just been released. But he couldn't believe how expensive they were.
What would it have cost you if you'd bought those drugs here in Australia?
Over 100,000 Australian dollars for a 12-week treatment, 84 tablets.
more than $1,000 for each tablet.
And that's out of the question for you.
I had trouble raising the $3,000 to go to India.
Greg bought the antiviral medicines that cured him in Chennai.
I knew that the drugs were available in India, and that was it. So I just flew to India and flew in by the seat of my pants, and it worked out well, fortunately.
The generic pills he purchased are made under license to US patent holder Gilead Sciences.
Why is Gilead licensing these drugs in India? Surely they're undercutting their own market.
No, because the Indians didn't grant a patent, so the Indians were going to make them anyway. So what Gilead has done is they're getting $1 or $2 a tablet for everything the Indians make, as opposed to getting nothing a tablet.
Greg's tablets and his trip to India cost just $5,000, 22 times less than if he'd purchased the same medication in Australia.
Why do you think we have this system where a pill that costs less than $1 to make is being marketed at $1,000?
It's just pure and simple greed. It's just obscene greed.
That's important that you've come to us.
After the break,
He's just been sitting on this ticking time bomb. You're right.
the Kiwi nurse helping patients who are bypassing the system to get generic drugs they need.
Yep, it's leaving tonight.
But are they safe?
It's likely that only one of them will be active.
At 61, Greg Jeffries feels like he's been given a second chance at life. He cleared his hepatitis C with the drugs from India, but it didn't end there.
People just started to contact me, people who were desperate, and they had no other place to turn. So I started just helping them in whatever way I could to get access to the medicine.
And that's how the Hep C Buyers Club began. Greg became a link between patients and the makers of affordable generic drugs, and it's all perfectly legal.
Now, I mean, every day I'd get 10 emails from people I've helped saying, oh, I just got my results, I'm clear, I've got no virus, my liver function's all back to normal for the first time in 30 or 40 years, I'm not going to die, I'm going to see my grandchildren grow up. I mean, I get at least 10, 20 emails a day, every day of the week, 7 days a week, saying that, so I'm 100% confident.
Greg Jeffries wasn't acting alone. His Hobart doctor, James Freeman, wanted his patients to have access to safe as well as affordable drugs.
And that was what the Buyers Club is really all about, to make sure that when people spent their hard-earned dollars on these medications, that they were going to get what they paid for, what they needed.
Take these two medications.
These are two different versions of the same drug. They both
Havoni is for the most common type of hepatitis C. Twinvir, a generic made in Bangladesh.
This one is the product from Gilead, and this one is a product from a company called Incepta.
28 tablets of the medication made in Bangladesh will cost just $350. It's sold mostly in developing countries.
If you wanted to buy this one, and in fact we just did, it would cost you $22,000.
Havoni is the product sold in developed countries like New Zealand.
Here we go. There's a price differential for you.
But are they really the same drugs with different labels? Both Havoni and Twinvir contain sofosbuvir and a new drug.
The second drug it's combined with is called ledipasvir.
Professor Gaines says there is a potential pitfall because the high-tech facilities needed to make ledipasvir absorbable don't exist in Bangladesh.
So when people are importing the combination of two drugs, it's likely that only one of them will be active.
Yeah, look, this is a generic. It's produced
But Dr. Freeman is adamant that Twinvir works just as well as Havoni.
How do you make sure these generic drugs are safe?
Look, naturally be cautious. You need to be sure of your supply chain. Now, it may surprise people to know that most pharmaceutical companies don't actually make the chemicals that go into their tablets. They outsource that. That's exactly what we did. So we used a good company, we brought it into the country, we tested it. Every single patient lot that came in, we tested.
Surely the companies that make these medications need to be able to make a reasonable profit so that they can reinvest that money in research.
Well, if you look at the situation with this drug, for example, the development cost was $326 million. They have made $30 billion so far. And you do have to ask, how many billions is enough?
Yes, correct. That's what it does in a 24-week course.
Chris Hazelwood is now ready to take advantage of the inexpensive Buyers Club drugs. But first, he needs to make sure he gets the right medication.
It's important that you've come to us for treatment and monitoring.
Chris is getting help from specialist nurse Margaret Fraser.
We want to keep you safe.
Sure.
Unless we treat him now, he will develop end-stage liver disease. You know, that's a certainty. And so he's just been sitting on this ticking time bomb. He wants to clear the virus, he wants to get his health back, and he sees this as an opportunity to go and do that.
Yep, it's leaving tonight.
Fantastic.
In Tasmania, Greg has helped Chris order his medicines.
Anyway, I'll send you a tracking number tonight or tomorrow morning, and that you'll be able to actually sort of track it. It's not real accurate, but you'll be able to follow it as it moves from India to New Zealand.
Good. Okay, great.
The thing that you'll have to deal with, actually, it's kind of like when you're 10 years old and you're waiting for Christmas. You know, there's a lot of anxiety as you're thinking, oh, is it going to get here today or tomorrow? Is it going to get through all right? And it's a thing that everyone goes through, you know, this sort of anticipation anxiety. So you have to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it is it's been 25 years, so a couple more days isn't going to hurt.
If you couldn't get these generic drugs into New Zealand, would you go to Tasmania? Would you go to India?
Yes, I'd sell some musical instruments, or yeah, I would get there.
This is your life on the line.
I've only got one.
He didn't have to.
Yes!
This week, Chris received his package of hepatitis C pills from India. They cost him just over $3,500. He now has a good chance of clearing the virus, which would be great news, not just for Chris, but for our public health system.
And we're seeing rates of liver cancer from Hep C rising by almost 20% per year at the moment. And the only way to stop that is by treating people with hepatitis C.
So the cost of not treating hepatitis C with the new drugs is also high, more than $500 million over the next 20 years.
Currently on our adult waiting list for liver transplantation, almost half the patients have complications of hepatitis C.
This year, about 220 New Zealanders will die as a result of hepatitis C. But by 2030, it's predicted that number will triple unless they get treatment. So liver specialists in New Zealand believe that the rational and humane thing to do is what the Aussies have done.
From the 1st of March, everybody living in Australia who has hepatitis C will have access to free oral treatment, so 8 or 12 weeks of treatment. People will want to be treated because it's simple, no side effects, almost everybody is cured. I think we should do all of that.
While the Aussies might now have almost fully subsidised Hep C drugs, in New Zealand, Pharmac is still negotiating with the drug companies, hoping to strike a price that is more palatable. But while those talks continue, thousands of people like Chris Hazelwood have cirrhosis and can't wait.
Well, after the second day, I feel clear-headed, a lot more energy, and my mental state has improved dramatically. I'm so relieved that I might have an option for a better life.
So Gilead Sciences, the company which owns the New Zealand patent for sofosbuvir, says it's offering the New Zealand government access to its hepatitis C drugs for considerably less than the figures mentioned in our story. The company says it runs a compassionate access program in New Zealand which provides the medications to seriously ill patients for free. Gilead did not respond to Greg Jeffrey's claim that its drug pricing in developed countries amounts to obscene greed.